18 minutes ago, Scott, that the Pelicans were being told by members of their front office staff not to leave the locker room. And then we found out that Courtney Kirkland, one of the officials, worked the Utah-Toronto game on Monday. Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz, according to Woj earlier tonight, testing positive for the coronavirus, the reason for the Oklahoma City-Utah game being postponed tonight. And so, obviously, that was connected to the reason why the Pelicans didn't want to play the game. And we've just told that the game has been officially postponed. In fact, they just announced it to a sparse crowd here, and you could probably hear some of the reaction in the background. So I don't know what to ask here, Richard, other than I guess this is a former player. I mean, you're ready to play a game, and now you're not.
So
how do you handle it?
I'm going to say this. I was in China earlier this year when people weren't sure whether or not the games were going to go on between the Brooklyn Nets and the Los Angeles Lakers. And there was an uncertainty there, and there's an uncertainty here. This uncertainty, though, I think it's for public health, and they're doing the right thing. When one player gets it, we talked about it earlier, it goes throughout the team. You're all touching the same balls. You're drinking the same water. You're all doing the exact same things in a very close, confined area. You're traveling on planes, playing cards. These are things that happen, and everyone gets it. So I understand why the NBA is being extremely cautious and why the Pelicans are being cautious.
I do ask that you please exercise
It was just announced again over the loudspeaker, and I think it was before when they announced. I don't think they were as clear. You just heard a clear announcement, and that's why everybody is booing. So, as a player, as a former player, Richard, you don't know when NBA action is going to resume. So,
no, you don't. This is similar to a lockout, where it's like you just have to prepare. You have to stay ready. You have to make sure that you're mentally locked in, which can be difficult when you don't have an end date or a date that you're working towards. But I think players and fans need to understand that this is in the best case, or this is the best case possible for making sure that everyone stays healthy and that you limit the spread of this disease.
All right, so the Pelicans-Kings game postponed, and Scott will continue to update you if we get more information on exactly what happened and how much this was related to Courtney Kirkland, one of the officials, and the connection to work in the game on Monday between Utah and Toronto, and how much it was that the Pelicans just didn't want to play when other games were being postponed. And you could understand why a lot of fans are unhappy. But the developments that we just presented to you all came down in the last 45 minutes. So that's what we got from here now. Sacramento will say goodbye. Send it back to Scott in the studio.
Dave, Richard, thank you so much. This is a surreal evening, and it is a scene that plays out as follows. It's interesting, during the game, Doris Burke made the point and asked, I thought, a legitimate question. Why would they play this last game? And she was curious whether those players in this game would want to go forward, given the involvement of Kirkland and being in that Utah game early in the week. Did that play a role? I suppose we'll find that out in short order. Adrian Wojnarowski joins us now. And Woj, since we've last spoken, obviously this game is postponed. If I said canceled, I misspoke. It's postponed, as is play for now. In the time since we've spoken, obviously you've been talking to people around the league. What is reaction to this unprecedented evening?
Well, Scott, shock, and really how quickly this escalated from a phone call, a teleconference earlier today between the league office and the Board of Governors, essentially the owners, where I was told somebody on the call actually brought up the idea, should we just suspend play and stop? And they were told, no, we that's not necessary. That's a step we don't have to discuss yet. And the expectation among owners was that, and the league office, was tomorrow Adam Silver would announce that games would be played without fans in the arena, and that all changed this evening with Rudy Gobert. And now you're hearing from other teams, agents, players who've been in proximity of Rudy Gobert now who want to go and get tested. This is going to be a story, obviously, that keeps unfolding and unraveling as we move forward. But this is for the NBA, and I think all of professional sports. This is uncharted territory.
And the fact that as Royce Young just reported, both the teams, the Jazz and the Thunder, remain in their locker rooms. And I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but I'm just thinking out loud. Who's qualified to tell them they're free to go? Like, who does the NBA bring in that situation? And what is it that they want to find out before the players are allowed to sort of go back out into the world?
Yeah, Scott, the teams themselves have been doing a lot of research with medical professionals, their doctors, their medical staff. The league has been in consistent contact with teams, informing them. Literally, teams will tell you 13, 14 emails a day with the latest information. But here's something that multiple teams told me really in recent days and reaffirmed tonight, that they were told that if a player tested positive for the coronavirus, that it would be essentially a 2-week self-quarantine process for that player. And so that's the, that 12, 14-day window was what teams were told to expect, that a player would not be allowed to be around any of his teammates, the organization, if he tested positive.
I want to, Woj, hold tight for just a moment. I want to bring in Doris Burke, and Doris was obviously on the call in Dallas along with Ryan Ruocco. And I mean, we keep using a lot of the same words here, unprecedented, surreal, but they clearly apply to an evening unlike any that any of us have been a part of. As you're calling this game in real time, and we're seeing Mark Cuban, who was great with Tom Rinaldi, just react in real time. What was all of that sort of like to try to digest?
Well, Scott, I think Doris and I sort of talked about it when we were coming to the arena today, saying, there is now a palpable feeling in the air of unease, uncertainty, and obviously it permeates much more than just our sports universe. But for anybody who wasn't consuming news constantly, now you were at the point where you couldn't avoid the shift in energy. And for it to then change as quickly as it did in this arena, I think we were all anticipating a domino falling at some point in the very near future, and felt like it was inevitable that games would be played without fans at some point, and then perhaps progressing to a hiatus. But you could tell there was already sort of an eerie feeling, and Doris, obviously, that escalated very quickly and created a surreal atmosphere here tonight.
So it was interesting before the game, Scott. I had reached out to a couple of players and know some thoughts of the players that were involved in tonight's game. And the sentiment was similar. They were processing information in real time as we are. They're trying to stay as educated as possible. They were contemplating this idea that they would play in empty arenas. And while that notion was bizarre to them, Scott, they were unified in this sentiment, and that was that they had hoped that the season wouldn't be suspended. It would be fascinating now that one of their own has tested positive. I imagine their perspective has changed as all Americans' perspective continues to sort of react in real time.
And you made the point, Doris, and I agreed with just the idea that why not just say this is it after tonight? And frankly, I didn't know how you don't pull the plug in the middle of a game. I mean, you've got a game with a score on the board and you've got an arena full of people, but didn't it feel odd to continue on with the understanding that the line in the sand had been drawn at the conclusion of a game which now didn't even get played, because I guess those teams decide we're not going to play. It was just, it felt odd to just continue sort of in that moment. Go ahead.
Inconsequential is what it felt.
Well put.
And I was frankly, and I said this on the broadcast and you made note of it, I was a little bit surprised they were going to play that second game, and I'll be curious to see how that decision unfolded. The NBA did the reasonable, responsible, only thing they could do, which is suspend the season. But I was surprised initially about that, Rye.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And obviously we'll get the actual information of how it unfolded, as the evening goes on and into tomorrow morning. But I think you made the great point, Doris. Once the knowledge is there for these players, do they then start to say, hold on a second,
right,
I don't necessarily want to be a part of this, and I'm curious, what role that may have played in what happened in Sacramento?
Enormous respect to the players between the lines, because in this day and age, they were aware, according to Mark Cuban, of what was going on, and the fact that they could keep their concentration and their level of play to the degree they did, I was in awe of that.
And just one final sort of overarching thought, that this game continued under this cloud of just astounding news. And I realize the game's just ended. You've not necessarily crossed paths with the players, but was there a sense at all of their processing this? Doris, you made the point, we live in this world where phones are out at halftime. They got to know what's going on. Holy bleep, what are we doing here? Any sense at all from them of how odd this evening was?
I thought at the end of the game, Scott, we took a shot of Mark Cuban talking with some of his players, and obviously we didn't have Mark mic'd in that moment, and we don't know exactly what was said, but just looking at the tenor of the body language, that seemed to be a discussion about the overarching events of this evening. And so, maybe during the flow of action, they were able to sort of put it in the back of their minds, but as the result was no longer in doubt, it seemed like it started to creep more into the reality of the players who were taking place in this game.
Yeah, agreed.
Ryan, Doris, thank you so much. A night, obviously, none of us will soon forget as we step aside from the NBA action for the foreseeable future. Thank you so much for sticking around for us.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Well, obviously, the news that Rudy Gobert was, we will assume, patient zero, if you will, within the NBA. That news came this evening. Prior to the fact that the NBA has suspended play for the foreseeable future. And in the past couple of weeks, if you're curious, where have the Jazz been? Well, they were at home in late February when the Wizards came to town, then on the road in Cleveland, in New York, in Boston, in Detroit, then this Monday home against the Raptors. Then this evening they were scheduled to play the Oklahoma City Thunder. Again, that game was just moments away from tip when the game was postponed, and subsequently the season for now